Hey everyone, and welcome back to another news alert. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and thank you so much for tuning into Boyd News. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more updates like this. And feel free to support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Links are in the description below the video. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this video from. Welcome to your Saturday. Hope you're all enjoying your weekend so far, and I hope it's going fantastically well. We've got a ton of huge news to share with this war update today. We have a big story out of the Netherlands that the Dutch military was forced to open fire upon drones that were invading airspace over a major military base housing American nuclear weapons. Here's that news story for you here on your screen. It says troops fire upon invading drones over airbase in the Netherlands. Dutch military and civilian police were investigating, according to the ministry, which said it was unclear why the drones were flying above and around the airbase. No further details were provided. So here's a little satellite image of this airbase known as Volkel Air Base. And from what I understand, there's somewhere around 15 to 22 nuclear weapons that come from the United States that are stored here at this base. What were these drones doing over here? Why are we continuing to see this? And if you guys notice, it's always over some sort of sensitive military site or some sort of international airport. So very interesting what we're seeing with NATO now. NATO's taking more action. They're starting to shoot at these drones now. I think it was just in the last month or two, I gave you guys a report out of Estonia that the military over there was engaging on some drones. They actually shot one down, but reportedly they were never able to find the drone that was taken down over there. So these drone sightings are still ongoing. We'll talk more about this in just a moment. Other top headline news we'll be sharing with you today. For the first time, Ukraine has shot down a Russian MI-8 helicopter mid-air by a deep strike drone. New video has surfaced online showing the event in action. This is more huge losses for the Russian military as these aircraft cost around $10 million or more. Also, Ukrainian drones targeted electrical substations in occupied Crimea and the occupied territory of the Donetsk region in southeastern Ukraine. Power outages have been reported after direct strikes on substations by drones. On top of this news, another gas station has been blown up by the armed forces of Ukraine in the Belgorod region of Russia. This is the second time in the last week we've had reports of gas stations being destroyed in this region. And aside from all the attacks overnight, I have more details regarding the U.S. peace plan for Ukraine today and more information as to how Europe will be responding to counter this new proposal to end the war. So let's jump into this. Let me start sharing all these details with you guys. We're going to hop on over here to X with Megatron Ron. It says breaking yesterday evening, the Royal Dutch Air Force attempted to shoot down several unidentified drones above Volkel Air Base, according to Dutch state TV, or known as NOS. The base is home to two F-35 squadrons and American nuclear weapons. The drones were not hit and flew away after being engaged. They were not recovered. Okay, so what happened here? Why were these drones flying over this base? Still waiting for more details, but we've been seeing that these drones appear to be monitoring against sensitive military sites. That's usually where these drones are being spotted. So I'm not sure if these little FPV drones that they're finding over here. We've heard reports in the past, even in Denmark, that some of these drones are like the size of like a van, a minivan or something. They're like gigantic. But apparently drones were being spotted once again over the Netherlands. Here's more information now. World Source News. Breaking Dutch authorities. Dutch Air Force opened fire at drones over Volkel Air Base in the Netherlands last night. Here's a report. Ministry of Defense took action Friday evening when several drones were spotted over Volkel Air Base between 7 and 9 p.m. The drones were observed by security personnel. Air Force personnel deployed weapons from the ground to shoot them down. The drones departed and were never recovered. Following the report, the Royal Netherlands Maréchaussee, I'm not sure if I'm saying that's right, and the police were notified. They are conducting a further investigation. It is currently unclear why the drones were flying above and around the air bases. For security reasons, the Ministry of Defense is not providing further information about how the drones were sighted or what action is taken. So yeah, not a whole lot of information coming out. It looks like the authorities are staying pretty quiet about this, and probably also not to create too much panic, right? Because this is obviously a base housing nuclear weapons. That seems a little dangerous if you think about it. But again, if these are Russian drones that are doing this, that are flying over sensitive military sites, it would make sense why they'd be conducting reconnaissance over this base. considering the fact that it has American nuclear weapons over here. So obviously very dangerous information. If I get more stories here regarding this information of this Volkel Air Base, we'll do another video on that later. Now, Bliskovka, for the first time, a Russian Mi-8 helicopter was shot down in midair by a deep strike drone. This happened in the Rostov region. This mission left the enemy with many questions, the answers to which are only known to the Mi-8 crew members, but they will not tell the fighters right. So apparently the pilots and anybody crew that were on board this helicopter lost their lives in this strike. Here's the video coming out showing this drone directly slamming into the top of this helicopter. You can see right here, it's going to cut out in just a moment there. We'll roll it back. It's a very quick clip here, but we can clearly see this drone engaging right on the top of this helicopter here. So an Mi-8 helicopter, I believe these are transport choppers that are used for the Russian military. So Ukraine was confirming that today. I believe this happened recently, the strike on this Mi-8 helicopter. And I heard some reports also that this was actually an FP2 or an FP1 drone produced by the company Firepoint, which is also producing the Flamingo missile, cruise missile for Ukraine. So very big news. This happened in the Rostov region, according to Bliskovka. Now, war translated, drones targeted electrical substations overnight in occupied Donetsk and Krasno-Perekopsk in Crimea, causing widespread power outages across multiple districts. I got a 25-second clip, video out of the Donetsk region showing complete darkness over there. We've been seeing this for probably about 3 or 4 days now. Ukraine's been destroying a lot of electrical substations in that area. Then also video out of Crimea showing a direct hit on electrical substation down there as well. Take a look.
Калужская 32, темнота, и дальше погнали, темнота, темнота, темнота.
Где-то вспышками. Вон. Вон она.
Калужская 30.
All right, so it's been lights out inside the Donetsk region and occupied territory held by the Russians for just about coming up on a week now. Ukraine's been destroying a lot of electrical substations in those areas. We continue to see blackouts, and then on top of that, Ukraine hammering Crimea, going after more electrical substations down here. We also had an unconfirmed report yesterday that Ukraine may have attacked the Saki thermal power plant down there that's been attacked numerous times and possibly with missiles yesterday. Have not been able to confirm that yet, but as we can see, Ukraine continuing a campaign trying to destroy electrical substations down here in Crimea and Donetsk region. Now, war translated, Rosneft gas station in Volkel, Belgorod region was destroyed by a drone strike, causing a massive fire visible across the city. Here's another video of this gas station being destroyed by Ukraine. Take a look.
Заправщик въебали на Роснефти на совхозе.
All right, so confirmed to be the second time in the last week Ukraine is striking gas stations over here in the Belgorod region. This is just over the border from Ukraine's Kharkiv region, and we've seen this time and time again. And actually, this happened multiple times in the past too, like in the last year. But more recently, we have been seeing Ukraine using FPV drones to set these gas stations on fire, probably going to create more gas shortages in these regions. Now, end strike. According to The Guardian, Trump has appointed Dan Driscoll, J.D. Vance's friend and former classmate, as his new special envoy, likely replacing Keith Kellogg. U.S. sources also report that after the recent visit to Kyiv, a group of American generals is expected to fly to Moscow late next week to discuss the peace plan with the Kremlin. Okay, so Dan Driscoll here. So he was showing up inside of Kyiv yesterday to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky. He's the secretary for the U.S. Army also. So apparently he's going to be replacing Keith Kellogg, the special envoy from the Trump administration, which we heard is going to be stepping down here very soon. He'll be resigning in January. So it looks like he's no longer involved in these negotiations. And it really seems like Dan Driscoll is not on Ukraine's side. He's really supportive of this plan to push Ukraine to sign it, which we know is basically a capitulation for Ukraine to surrender to Russia. So I've got more details on this today. From next to now, it's a nightmare. The U.S. is pressuring Zelensky, warning that if Kyiv doesn't sign the agreement now, the terms will be much worse later. Says, quote, "There's no such thing as a perfect deal, but it needs to be done sooner than rather than later," U.S. Army Secretary Driscoll told NATO ambassadors in Kyiv. This happened after his talks with Zelensky and a phone call from the White House. The mood in the room was grim. The Guardian reports several European ambassadors questioned both the substance of the deal and the fact that the U.S. had negotiated with Russia without keeping its allies informed. It was a nightmare meeting. Again, the same "you have no cards" argument, a source told the outlet. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing a lot of now, is we're going back to this whole notion of Ukraine doesn't have the cards. You know, the U.S. has the cards. The U.S. going to push this war to come to an end, and Russia holds the cards. Anybody other than Ukraine doesn't hold it. So we're seeing a complete flip-flop from the Trump administration again in America. They're starting to side back with Russia again, trying to get this war over with, but we know again this peace plan is heavily favoring Russia. So I got more details now from N-Strike. It's time to end this nonsense. With his tone, the United States is pressuring Ukraine and Europe regarding Trump's plan, which according to American officials is almost non-negotiable, Financial Times reports. Remember that, how it states non-negotiable for this plan. At yesterday's meeting at the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, the atmosphere was described as sickening by one European diplomat present due to the Americans' harsh stance. The discussion quickly spiraled out of control, the diplomat said, adding that there was even the use of profanity and abusive language. Trump's newly appointed special envoy, Kellogg's replacement, U.S. Secretary of the Army Daniel Driscoll, stated that it is only a matter of time before Kyiv will have to reach an agreement. During the discussion, Driscoll called the war nonsense. This must be stopped, and said that Ukraine is in a very bad situation and now is the best time for peace. He insisted that Zelensky must sign the agreement by Thursday. UN ambassadors present at the meeting described the U.S. messaging as shocking, calling the American proposal a strategic victory for Russia and a capitulation for Ukraine. The Americans in turn rejected those accusations, insisting that Trump's plan is the best outcome Ukraine can realistically hope for. Let me know if you agree with that. Do you think this plan is the best that Ukraine can hope for? Or do you think the U.S. administration is trying to rush this thing through? That's what it seems like. They're putting heavy pressure onto Ukraine, onto Volodymyr Zelensky to get him to sign this now. Obviously, also willing to withdraw support for Ukraine, weapons, intelligence, all those kinds of things. Ukraine is in a very difficult position right now. What do? Do they sign this thing? Do they not? Let the U.S. walk away and no longer support Ukraine anymore? We're going to have to see how this plays out, but it's not looking good with some of these statements like what we're seeing here, and also hearing that this plan is pretty much non-negotiable, meaning that most likely amendments will not be allowed by the United States. So we're going to have to see how that happens as well. Now, you're going to nod it. Trump indirectly threatens NATO. The U.S. has warned its NATO allies that conditions for Ukraine will deteriorate significantly if Kyiv does not sign a peace agreement by Thursday, said U.S. Army Secretary Driscoll, Trump's special envoy for the Kremlin plan after his negotiations with Zelensky. Trump's shameful betrayal poses significant risk to NATO and its eastern flank, particularly for members like Poland, the Baltic states, or Romania, which could be interpreted as an indirect threat. Europe must wake up now. Here's a report from The Guardian. U.S. tells NATO if Zelensky does not sign peace deal, Ukraine will face worse in the future. So threatening Ukraine and NATO saying that, Ukraine needs to sign this now. If not, they're probably going to have a peace deal that's worse than this one in the future. On top of that, is Ukraine going to lose more land if the U.S. withdraws support for Ukraine? Crazy information today. Here's another one now from Nexta. Trump said that Zelensky will have to love the deal proposed by the United States, and reminded that the Ukrainian president has no cards to play. So as you can see, right back at it again, saying that Ukraine has no cards. Here's a little 1-minute clip of Trump speaking yesterday at the White House. Take a look.
To ask you also about this Ukraine plan. President Zelensky said today that his country would risk either giving up a partner or giving up its dignity. There's been criticism that this deal proposal...
He doesn't like it?
It's unclear. He was sort of tenuous about it.
He'll have to like it, and if he doesn't like it, then, they should just keep fighting, I guess,
The suggestion that he made, though, was that if he doesn't accept it, that the U.S. would pull back its support for Ukraine. Is that
Well, at some
accurate?
point he's going to have to accept something. He hasn't accepted. You remember right in the Oval Office not so long ago, I said, you don't have the cards. Don't forget, I inherited this war. This war never would have happened. I inherited this war. And I thought he should have made a deal a year ago, 2 years ago. The ultimate deal would have been if it never started. That would have been the good deal. That could have been done too if you had the right president, but you didn't have the right president.
To ask you also.
Okay, so it seems like Trump is very serious about this plan. It seems like a take it or leave it kind of situation. Either Ukraine signs it or the U.S. going to walk away and no longer support Ukraine. And what's going to happen there is Europe going to be able to pick up the heavy load for Ukraine if we see the U.S. pull out. So I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out here. Now, from NUKE reports, Europe is rushing to buy time for Ukraine after the U.S. set a hard deadline, for accepting its peace plan. Leaders from France, Germany, and others are coordinated to rewrite key parts of their proposal without directly opposing Washington. German Chancellor Merz has already urged Trump to extend talks. EU leaders will meet at the G20 to craft a joint response. Here's a report here. Europe scrambles for time after U.S. sets Ukraine an ultimatum. So, it looks like right now Europe is scrambling at the moment. They're trying to, get things in order and try to figure out how they're going to respond to this. They're trying to put together a new peace plan for Ukraine right now. We heard about that yesterday. Should have more details on that today. And there's going to be a major meeting coming up, I believe, starting tomorrow or here very soon. And also we could have European leaders showing up in Kyiv today. We've got several updates on that now from Savchenko Volodymyr. European countries want to change at least 4 points of Trump's peace plan, according to Bild. Proposal for the division of territories, reduction of the Ukrainian army, which is already numerically inferior to the Russian one. Security guarantees for Ukraine. Europeans do not believe that Russia will never attack Ukraine again. The future of frozen Russian assets. Putin should not make money on them. Okay, so this looks like some of the major things they want to start changing here. So they want to work out the proposal for division of territories. So we're hearing that Russia wants control of the Donbass. Okay, and apparently they're not really going to give up much. They might give up some small parts of like Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy region, Kharkiv region, some of these small areas that Russia's controlling. But aside from that, they're going to pretty much retain everything that they are currently fighting for right now. A reduction of the army. We know that Ukraine is not going to agree to that. That's a very big one. Why would you do that when Russia attacked you and in the future could attack again, especially with this peace plan that could severely weaken Ukraine? And then security guarantees for Ukraine. Apparently they want some stronger ones to assure that Russia is not going to attack Ukraine again. And then the future of frozen Russian assets. We've been talking about this. They're worried that this peace plan will sabotage utilizing the frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. They've been trying to tap into those to allow Ukraine to utilize those funds. So some major points here. Looks like Europe wants to amend. Now, Vicegrad 24, according to the 28-point peace plan, Ukraine's military would have to be cut in half from 1.2 million personnel to 600,000. Meanwhile, Russia has adopted a policy of increasing its military forces from 1.4 million today to 2 million in 2030. So think about that as well. So at the same time with this peace plan, Ukraine's going to be forced to decrease the size of their military, and we know that Russia's increasing it. So again, why would Ukraine want to do that? Why would they put themselves in a weaker position to allow Russia to attack them again, especially if they give up the Donbass? That includes the Donetsk region with all those major fortifications over there that are currently holding the Russians back. So obviously, we're going to see some major amendments coming from the Ukrainian side along with European partners. Here's more information now. Anton Yushchenko, Russian members of parliament, are not even trying to hide that Russia has no intention of abiding by any peace agreement. As I've said before, we're discussing the points of a peace plan without Russia that doesn't care for it and shows no readiness for peace. Russian member of parliament Alexei Zhuravlev wrote, "It would be strange to equate the plan presented by the United States with Russia's demands. Any agreements proposed by the U.S. or the EU will never lead to a lasting peace. The conflict can be fully and definitively resolved only in the event of our clear victory on the battlefield and Ukraine's capitulation. This is exactly what the Russian army is currently working on quite successfully. Any other outcome would only postpone the confrontation. The American idea is to leave Ukraine as a restraining factor against Russia. Even if it is territorially and militarily reduced, it will still pose a significant threat to us, and military presence would be required along the western borders." Okay, so clearly According to this member of parliament, Alexei Zhuravlev, he's confirming Russia does not want peace. They want to continue the war in Ukraine, and they want Ukraine's military destroyed. They want them demilitarized. They most likely want to take them over, obviously, right? So this is confirming even further Russia is not ready to agree to peace. And we heard recently, yesterday, I think Trump was stating that he's going to be willing to put sanctions onto Russia if Russia does not agree to this peace deal. So far, all this pressure is being put on Ukraine to sign this thing, while at the same time, the Russians are not claiming at all they're going to be willing to agree to this peace plan. Now, NOLA reports Ukraine has formed a formal delegation for talks on Trump's peace plan, including direct discussions with the U.S., international partners, and Russian representatives. The team is headed by Presidential Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak and includes NSDC, which is the National Security Defense Council Secretary Umerov, GUR Chief Kirilo Budanov, and other top defense and intelligence officials. Talks will take place in Switzerland. So yeah, what I'm hearing is very soon. I think it could be as soon as tomorrow, but very soon we're going to be seeing some meetings between the U.S., EU, and Ukraine. Okay, and they're going to be discussing this peace deal, and then that's probably when Europe will come out and start to, unveil their version of their counter proposal. So we should be hearing more about that. If we get some major details tomorrow, I might jump on and do a video for you guys. But as most of you know, I'm usually not here on Sundays. So if anything, I'll come back on Monday and give you guys all the fresh information coming out from these meetings. Now, Bliskovka, borders should not be changed by force. Joint statement by the EU, Canadian, and Japanese leaders on the U.S. peace plan. Politicians believe that this project is a foundation that will require further work. They are also concerned about the proposed restrictions on the armed forces of Ukraine, which will make Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. So this was a statement coming out from EU leaders, okay, and also from Canadian and Japanese leaders also regarding this peace plan, okay? So they're saying that they believe this project is a foundation that will require further work, okay? So they're stating that basically it's not going to be in a week that we see, Ukraine signing this. There's lots of work that needs to be done. So it's crazy that Trump's like, hey, you need to sign this immediately. You got no choice. You can't make any amendments. You can't change anything here. Just sign the deal and that's it, or we're pulling out, is pretty much what we're seeing from the U.S. side. So yeah, major statement coming out from the leaders of Europe and many other nations that support Ukraine. Now, I've got some statements from several top leaders around the world, especially out of the U.S. and some senators in Congress. Here's some information from Military News UA. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says any peace plan between Ukraine and Russia must. Okay, now I want you guys to see this here. Here's the post from J.D. Vance on X. Says any Ukraine-Russia peace plan has to, number one, stop the killing while preserving Ukrainian sovereignty. Number two, be acceptable to both Russia and Ukraine. Number three, maximize the chances that war doesn't restart. Every criticism of the peace framework the administration is working on either misunderstands the framework or misstates some critical reality on the ground. There's a fantasy that if we just give more money, more weapons, more sanctions, victory is at hand. Peace won't be made by failed diplomats or politicians living in a fantasy land. It might be made by smart people living in the real world, okay? So let me know what you think on these top 3 points here. This plan must stop the killing while preserving Ukrainian sovereignty. I think that makes sense. Be acceptable to both Russia and Ukraine. Maybe in some ways, could this plan be acceptable with some amendments? I think possibly to Ukraine. But with Russia, again, we're not seeing them agreeing to anything right now. They want to continue what they call special military operation inside of Ukraine until Ukraine's military is defeated. And then number 3, maximize the chances the war doesn't restart. So that's a big one, right? We can't put Ukraine in a position where they are weakened. A lot of the points in this plan will weaken Ukraine. So obviously, in my opinion, this is not a good plan for Ukraine. I don't see them agreeing to this. And again, I think we're going to have some major issues coming up this week if Ukraine decides to not sign it. Now, NOLA reports the White House peace plan is already facing strong resistance from both Republicans and Democrats. Senator Mitch McConnell warned Trump against appeasing Putin, calling for new advisors if that's the case. Senator Roger Wicker criticized the plan as unrealistic and unacceptable if it means forcing Ukraine to cede territory. Senator Jean, I don't know if it's Jean or Jean Shaheen, called it a surrender deal written for Putin. Meanwhile, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick is pushing to vote on a new Russia sanctions despite House leadership. Pro-Ukraine allies are planned rallies are planned across the U.S. this weekend. Here's Senator Roger Wicker out of the U.S. The so-called peace plan has real problems, and I'm highly skeptical it will achieve peace. Ukraine should not be forced to give up its lands to one of the world's most flagrant war criminals is Vladimir Putin. The size and disposition of Ukraine's armed forces is a sovereign choice for its government and people. Any assurances provided to Putin should not reward his malign behavior and undermine the security of the United States or allies. In particular, any suggestion that we can pursue arms control with a serial liar and killer like Putin should be treated with great skepticism. So you're going to see a lot of statements like this. It seems like everybody except for the White House under the Trump administration is serious about putting pressure onto Russia that, Russia is the aggressor who attacked Ukraine. Do not award, Vladimir Putin, award Ukraine, put pressure on Russia to end this war is pretty much what we're seeing a lot of these statements from today. Here's another one from Visioner. President Trump's plan to force Ukraine to give up more territory, to cut its army by more than half, to never join NATO nor let foreign troops in its territory is an abomination. Freedom-loving Americans must tell the president that we reject the worst appeasement seen since 1938. The Russians said they respected Ukraine's sovereignty and boundaries in 1994. What makes President Trump think we can now trust Putin? This agreement weakens Ukraine and leaves them vulnerable to new Russian invasions in the years to come, said Republican Congressman Don Bacon. Yeah, so I have to agree with that also. I think this proposal will weaken Ukraine and possibly allow the war to restart in the future. Again, just simply, Ukraine has warned so many times that if they give up the Donbass, these are major fortifications that will allow Russia to storm directly deeper into Ukraine. Okay, so they've been creating these fortifications over there for several years now, and these are designed to hold the Russians back. And what are we seeing inside the Donetsk region? The Russians are not really moving very quickly over there, right? So clearly, I think this plan is not good for Ukraine. So let's see what happens if Ukraine decides to sign it. Here's another one now, Max 25. He's citing Lindsey Graham. This is another U.S. senator from South Carolina. He says, while there are many good ideas in the proposed Russia-Ukraine peace plan, there are several areas that are very problematic and can be made better. The goal of any peace deal is to end the war honorably and justly and not create new conflict. Finally, to the world, what about the fate of the almost 20,000 Ukrainian children kidnapped by Putin's forces? This issue has to be addressed in any negotiated settlement. Yeah, think about that too. And this is, another issue on top of probably, hundreds of other issues with this war and war crimes that the Russians have carried out inside of Ukraine. So, yeah, just these 20,000 Ukrainian children, maybe even more, that have been kidnapped from these areas of Ukraine that were invaded by Russia. That's a big problem, right? And Ukraine's still trying to get some of these children back. There's a lot of them still held within Russian captivity right now. It's absolutely insane. Now, next, Polish Prime Minister Tusk has sharply commented on the U.S. peace plan for Ukraine. According to media reports, one of the points includes the deployment of NATO aircraft in Poland. Tusk said that Warsaw will make its own decisions regarding security. All the decisions concerning Poland will be taken by the Poles. Nothing about us without us. When it comes to peace, all the negotiations should include Ukraine. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So we're hearing the same topic here that, why is the U.S. negotiating all these different settlements and everything on behalf of other nations like Poland, telling Poland that they're going to be storing NATO aircraft over there for whatever reason. I don't know if that has something to do with Ukraine. I would assume it does, but I'm not 100% sure based on this plan. So the prime minister is saying that the U.S. cannot just be making up these deals and telling countries that they're going to be doing whatever the U.S. tells them to do with these proposals, right? That these countries need to make their own decisions regarding their own security, just like Ukraine should be doing the same as well. Now from N-Strike, Polish President Karol Nawrocki, amid the proposals emerging about ending Russia's war in Ukraine, everyone must keep in mind that the fact that Russia is a country that does not respect agreements. Any peace plan aimed at ending the war started by Russian Federation in Ukraine must be accepted in Kyiv. It is Ukraine that has become the victim of Putin's criminal aggression, and it is Ukrainians with the support of the United States and EU countries who must have the decisive voice in peace negotiations. Any agreement concerning Europe's peace and security can only be achieved with the participation of all relevant parties. The price of peace cannot, under any circumstances, be the achievement of the aggressor's strategic goals, and the aggressor was and remains the Russian Federation. Okay, so even the president of Poland coming out and supporting Ukraine. So again, like I mentioned earlier, as we can see, it seems like just about everybody except for Donald Trump and the Trump administration, all the White House officials agree that the pressure needs to be put onto Russia, not Ukraine. Reverse what's going on with this peace deal, put the pressure onto Russia, and let's get this war ended over with. So crazy information what's coming out from here. Let me know what you think about some of those statements there. Here's one more statement from Razom for Ukraine. We're extremely troubled that the Trump administration is pressuring Ukraine to accept a punishing deal under duress. If the Trump administration follows through on its threat to withhold weapons purchased by Europe and end intelligence support, the White House will embolden Putin, endanger the rest of the free world, and prolong the war, not end it. We call on friends of peace in Congress and leaders across the United States to urge publicly and privately any deal to end the war must include ironclad guarantees for Ukraine and to insist that the White House takes into account the will of Ukraine's democratic society. So Razom, I believe, is a charity program inside of Ukraine that helps out a lot of families over there that are struggling with this war, helps rebuild homes, things like that. So they came out with a huge statement today that they're hoping that, Trump does not move forward with this. It'll put Ukraine in a terrible position and obviously embolden Vladimir Putin. So there's a statement coming out from them today also. Now, vision or breaking, Kiev police have issued special security measures across the capital for tomorrow. According to initial information, against the backdrop of Trump's pressure on Ukraine, European leaders will make an emergency visit to Ukraine tomorrow to support the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky. So this information was actually coming out yesterday morning, November 21st. So I haven't seen any details of European officials showing up inside of Ukraine and Kiev today. Maybe that information will come out later, but so far we haven't seen that. So maybe the next 24 hours we might see some top European officials showing up in Kiev to meet for consultations with Volodymyr Zelensky and discuss this emergency visit regarding this peace plan with the United States. Now for more translated, oil piers and two apps partially resumed with two tankers docking November 20th after Ukrainian strikes on November 2nd and 10th. Crimean Wind reported. Rosneft's deepwater pier remains empty after attacks halted shipments and caused a major oil spill. Okay, so what we're hearing today is the port of Tuapse in the Krasnodar Krai region in near the Black Sea. This major oil export port is partially resuming operations. We heard that the port of Novorossiysk, that also came under heavy attack by Ukrainian drones recently, has reopened a few days ago, and now we're starting to see the port of Tuapse slowly start to reopen right now. Apparently a few tankers have been showing up over recent days to start docking and exporting oil over there. Okay, so it looks like these ports are coming back online, and I wouldn't be surprised Ukraine's probably going to launch another massive attack over here to try to knock out these ports once again. Now, no reports overnight. Russia launched one Iskander-M ballistic missile from occupied Crimea and 104 attack drones, including Shahid, Guran, and others from multiple directions. Ukrainian air defense managed to shoot down or jam 89 of them. Hits were recorded at 15 locations. So we've been seeing pretty much over 100 drones almost every day for weeks now. 89 out of these 105 being shot down. Looks like we had one Iskander-M ballistic missile that was fired also. Not sure exactly where it struck inside of Ukraine, but according to this report, they did not shoot it down. But overall, pretty good numbers coming out from Ukraine's defense forces today, shooting down a good majority of these drones. Now, Kyiv Independent. These are the indicative estimates of Russia's combat losses as of November 22nd, according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And here's our final update. Russia's losses as of November 22nd, 1,170 troops, 7 AFVs, 74 vehicles and fuel tanks, 4 tanks, 9 artillery systems, 222 UAVs, 1 MLRS, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Okay, so it looks like we've got an anti-aircraft warfare system that has been destroyed overnight. The last few days, we haven't seen anything here. Another multiple launch rocket system being destroyed also. Then artillery systems, we've been seeing like less than 15 for days now, which I think is interesting. A lot of these numbers right here have been extremely low, except for maybe troop losses. Tanks and AFVs up a little bit more today than what we've been seeing. Yesterday was like 0 tanks and like 1 or 2 AFVs, I think. Vehicles and fuel tanks, about average numbers we've been seeing, right about 75. And then troop losses up a little bit more than typically, closer to 900 to 1,000, so upwards of almost 1,200 today. So guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in for today's update on November 22nd, 2025 on Saturday. I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend out there. Again, kind reminder, I most likely will not be here tomorrow. As usually, Sundays every week, I take off from the news, spend some time with myself, get some sunshine, and relax my mind a little bit. But otherwise, I'll be back here on Monday unless something crazy happens tomorrow. We'll give you guys more details regarding a lot of these top meetings that are coming out over the next 24 hours. So let me know what you think about all these details down below in the comment section. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.